34 years ago, on a cold Monday morning, just 4 days before Christmas in the year 1992, a group of sixth graders sat waiting at their desks in Rohrestown Elementary School in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Their teacher had not arrived. This was strange because she was always on time. She was kind, cheerful, and the kind of teacher who made every single student feel special. Her name was Christy Mirak, and she was 25 years old. The night before, Christy had wrapped a small gift for every child in her class. She had picked out a book for each one and written a personal little note to go with it. She was excited to hand them out before the students left for their winter break. She had spent the evening carefully wrapping each present, humming along to the radio, looking forward to seeing the smiles on her students' faces. She had no idea that she would never get the chance. As 9 o'clock came and went with no sign of Christy, the school principal, a man named Harry Goodman, began to worry. He picked up the phone and called her apartment. Nobody answered. He waited a few minutes and tried again. Still nothing. He tried a third time. Silence. Christy was known for being dependable. She did not miss work. She did not forget to call in. Something felt very wrong. Harry decided he could not simply sit at his desk and wait for an explanation to appear. He got into his car and began driving toward Christy's home, telling himself there had to be a simple, harmless reason for her silence. Maybe her car had broken down on the side of the road. Maybe she had overslept and was rushing to get ready. He scanned the roadside the entire drive, half expecting to see her standing beside her car with a flat tire, waving him down with an embarrassed smile. There was no sign of her along the way. When he pulled up outside her apartment in the Greenfield Estates complex, he noticed something that made his stomach turn. The front door was standing slightly open, swinging gently in the cold winter air. Christy was known to be extremely careful about locking her doors and windows. She often reminded her roommate and her friends to check that everything was secure before leaving the house. Seeing her door left open on a freezing December morning did not sit right with him at all. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. What Harry Goodman saw in the next few seconds would stay with him for the rest of his life. Christy was lying unresponsive on the floor of her living room. The Christmas gifts she had wrapped so lovingly the night before were scattered all around her, tossed about the room in every direction. Bags and wrapping paper lay crumpled on the carpet. The apartment looked as though a storm had torn through it. It was immediately clear to Harry that a violent struggle had taken place right there in that small living room, only hours earlier. Harry did not stay to check for a pulse. Some part of him already understood that there was nothing left to check. He turned and ran straight out of the apartment, sprinting toward the neighboring building, screaming for someone, anyone, to help him. When he finally reached a phone, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial. He called 911, but he was in such a state of shock that he could hardly get the words out. Over and over, he kept repeating two words to the people around him. Her face, her face. When police officers arrived at the apartment, they found a scene that shook even the most experienced among them. Christy Mirak was dead. She was still wearing her winter coat and her gloves, which told investigators right away that she had likely been getting ready to leave for work at the moment she was attacked. Her underwear had been removed, and the clothing on her upper body had been pushed up and out of place. She had been sexually assaulted in her own home. The attack on her body had been savage. She had been beaten severely around her face, her neck, her back, and her chest. Her jaw had been broken from the force of the blows. Investigators found a wooden cutting board lying near her body, and they believed she had grabbed it in a desperate attempt to defend herself, only for her attacker to tear it from her hands and use it against her instead. After the beating, Christy had been strangled to death, using her own sweater, pulled tight around her neck. It was one of the most violent and senseless killings the quiet community of Lancaster had ever witnessed. This was not a random burglary gone wrong. This was something far more personal and far more disturbing. Investigators moved carefully through the apartment, searching every corner for clues. There was no sign that anyone had broken in. The door had not been forced open. This single detail troubled detectives greatly because it pointed to one of two very different possibilities. Either Christy had opened the door herself and let her killer inside, which would mean she may have known him, or she had already unlocked the door on her way out to leave for work, and someone had forced their way in behind her at that exact terrible moment. Her roommate had left for her own job at around 7 o'clock that morning. Christy usually left the apartment around 7:45, giving herself just enough time to arrive at school before her students did. That meant her killer had struck sometime within a narrow 45-minute window, in broad daylight, on an ordinary weekday morning, just days before Christmas. Whoever did this had either been watching her closely or had gotten remarkably, chillingly lucky. Investigators did catch one small piece of good fortune in the middle of so much horror. The attacker had left behind biological evidence. Semen was discovered on Christie's body and on the carpet directly beneath where she had fallen. In the years to come, this small trace of evidence would end up being the single most important clue in the entire case. But in 1992, DNA science was still in its early stages. There was no way yet to type a DNA sample and search it against a nationwide database the way there is today. Investigators could carefully preserve the evidence, label it, and store it away, but they could not yet use it to point directly at a name or a face. With no forced entry and no immediate DNA match, detectives leaned heavily on eyewitnesses in the surrounding neighborhood. One woman told police that while walking near the apartment complex that morning, she had seen a man get out of a car and walk toward the building. She described him as being in his late 20s, heavy-set and muscular, somewhere between 225 and 250 pounds. She said he had long, stringy, medium brown hair that hung all the way down to his chest, and that he was clean-shaven with deep-set eyes. She remembered he wore a faded blue, white, and black shirt along with a pair of blue jeans. Other witnesses recalled seeing a car parked in an overflow lot across the street from Christie's building that same morning. They described it as a white vehicle with dark, louvered coverings over the rear window, similar in style to a Dodge Daytona. Police released a description of both the man and the car to the public, hoping someone would recognize either one and come forward. Investigators worked around the clock in the days and weeks that followed. They spoke with Christie's friends, her family members, her co-workers, and men she had known socially. They quickly cleared Principal Harry Goodman, the man who had discovered her body, as a suspect. They also looked closely at an older, married man Christie had been quietly seeing earlier that year, someone roughly 20 years her senior. DNA testing eventually ruled him out as well. By 1995, 3 years after the murder, police had interviewed more than 1,500 people connected to Christie, in one way or another. Using forensic testing, they had eliminated more than 60 men as possible suspects, comparing blood and biological samples against the evidence collected at the scene. And yet, despite all of that effort, they were no closer to identifying the person responsible. Slowly and painfully, the case went cold. It would remain so for over 20 years. Christie's family continued to grieve without answers, wondering every single day who could have done something so brutal to someone so full of life, and why that person had never been found. Christie grew up in the small town of Shamokin, Pennsylvania, a former coal mining community that had fallen on hard times by the time she was a young woman. The town had once thrived on the coal industry, but by the 1980s, that industry was fading fast, and so was much of the town's energy. Christie, however, was different. Friends often described her as a bright light in a place that could feel a little worn down. She had wanted to be a teacher for as long as anyone could remember. As a little girl, she used to play school with her younger brother and sister, lining them up as pretend students while she stood at an imaginary chalkboard, teaching lessons that only she could see. It was never just a passing childhood game for her. It was a dream she carried with her all the way into adulthood. After finishing high school, Christie moved to Lancaster County to attend Millersville University, determined to turn that childhood dream into a real career. Her dream came true faster than she probably expected. She began working as a substitute teacher at Town Elementary School, and it did not take long for the staff there to realize just how special she was with children. She was quickly offered a full-time teaching position. In her final year, she was given the 6th grade class that she came to love so deeply. Christie poured her heart into every single lesson. She gave each child individual attention, noticing which students needed extra encouragement and which ones needed an extra push. Her students adored her, and so did her fellow teachers. She was known around the school as warm, patient, and endlessly enthusiastic about her work. Outside of school, Christy was known as a caring, positive, and fiercely loyal friend. She was especially close with her mother, and she often tried to shield her family from worry by keeping the smaller details of her personal life to herself. She was also known to be very cautious when it came to safety, always making sure doors were locked and windows were secure. This was part of what made the crime scene so deeply unsettling to everyone who knew her. If Christy was so careful about locking her door, then how had someone gotten inside that morning? For years, that single question haunted her family, her friends, the town of Lancaster, and every investigator who had ever touched the case file. It sat there, unanswered, gathering dust in a filing cabinet, waiting for the day someone would finally find the courage, the technology, and the determination to open it back up again. That day finally came in 2015, 23 years after Christie's murder. The Lancaster County District Attorney's Office made the decision to reopen the cold case entirely. A new team of investigators sat down and went back through every single page of the old files, some of them yellowed with age, determined to look at the evidence with completely fresh eyes. They knew that DNA science had advanced enormously since the early 1990s, and they believed the time had finally come to put those advances to the test. In 2017, investigators sent the preserved DNA samples to a company called Parabon Nanolabs, a company that specialized in a process known as DNA phenotyping. This technology could examine a person's genetic markers and produce an approximate image of what that person might actually look like, without ever having met them. By November of that year, Parabon had created 3 separate images, showing what Christie's killer might have looked like at the ages of 25, 45, and 55. Investigators released these images to the public, hoping that a neighbor, a co-worker, or even a family member might recognize the face staring back at them from the newspaper or the television screen. But the biggest breakthrough of all was still to come. In May of 2018, Parabon took their investigation a significant step further. They uploaded the killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy website known as GEDmatch. This is a database where ordinary people voluntarily upload their own DNA information, usually because they are curious about their family history or hoping to find long-lost relatives they never knew existed. Because the site is open and public, investigators are also able to use it to search for genetic connections to unknown suspects in criminal cases. When the killer's DNA was compared against everyone else's information on the database, it revealed a set of distant relatives. From there, a genetic genealogist began the painstaking work of building out a family tree, tracing backward through generations of great-grandparents and second cousins, and then flipping that tree forward again, trying to find just the right person who matched the right combination of ancestry, age, and geography. The trail eventually led toward a family based in Lancaster, with roots in Northern Europe, combined with some Puerto Rican heritage. Digging carefully through old newspaper archives, the investigator came across an engagement announcement for a man connected to that very family, a man who carried a Latin American surname through his father's side. It was a promising lead, and it felt like the pieces were finally beginning to click into place. Further digging through old magazine archives turned up an interview with a man who described himself as being half Puerto Rican. All the threads were converging. Investigators believed they finally knew who Christie's killer might be, after 26 long years of silence. But believing was not enough. They needed absolute proof. Officers began quietly watching the man they suspected, careful not to alert him in any way. They waited patiently for the right opportunity to collect a sample of his DNA without him ever knowing he was under investigation. That opportunity finally arrived when the man took a DJ gig, performing at a local school event. Investigators positioned themselves nearby, watching him work the crowd, laugh with the students, and enjoy the evening as if nothing in the world was wrong. As the event wound down and he prepared to leave, he tossed a water bottle and a piece of chewing gum into the trash. The moment he walked away, investigators moved in and carefully retrieved both items. The DNA extracted from that discarded water bottle and chewing gum was rushed to the lab and compared against the DNA collected from Christie's apartment more than 25 years earlier. It was a match. The odds that this DNA belonged to anyone else on the entire planet were estimated at roughly 1 in 200 octillion, a number so large it is almost impossible to picture. On June 25, 2018, police finally arrested a 49-year-old man named Raymond Charles Rowe. The news stunned the entire community because Raymond Rowe was not some stranger lurking quietly in the shadows. He was a familiar, friendly face. Known locally by his stage name, DJ Freeze, Raymond had spent decades performing at weddings, school dances, and one of Lancaster's most popular nightclubs. In many ways, he was something of a local celebrity. He was married, he was a father, and he attended church regularly. He was, by every outward appearance, an ordinary, likable man. Investigators discovered that at the time of Christie's murder, Raymond had been working at a cleaning company location located just a short distance from her apartment. He lived only about 4 miles from the very building where she was killed. The car he drove back in 1992 was a white Toyota that closely matched the description witnesses had given decades earlier. There was also a strange and chilling detail connected to the nightclub where Raymond worked as a DJ every Friday night. A ticket to that very club was found among Christie's belongings after her death. It is entirely possible she had been there the Friday night before she was murdered, the same night Raymond would have been performing behind the turntables. Investigators could never find solid, direct proof that Christie and Raymond had ever spoken to one another, but it appeared entirely possible their paths had crossed at least once, perhaps more than once, without anyone around them ever noticing. Raymond Rowe was formally charged with rape and first-degree murder. As the legal process moved forward, Raymond eventually agreed to plead guilty in exchange for prosecutors agreeing not to pursue the death penalty. For prosecutors, the priority was making absolutely certain that Raymond would spend every single remaining day of his life locked behind bars, with no possibility of ever walking free again. When it came to the question of why he had done it, prosecutors admitted publicly that some answers about his motive might simply never be known. In court, it was revealed that on the very same day he raped and murdered Christie Marac, Raymond had gone about the rest of his day as though nothing at all had happened. That evening, he visited the home of his fiancée at the time, showing no outward sign of what he had just done only hours earlier. When news of Christie's murder began spreading through the town in the days that followed, Raymond had even expressed concern for his fiancée's safety, as though he were simply another worried resident of a shaken community. He went on to continue his life as DJ Freeze, performing at high-profile events, building a loyal following, marrying more than once, becoming a father, and cultivating a public reputation as a hard-working, friendly member of the community. For 26 years, nobody around him ever suspected a thing. Raymond Rowe was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with an additional consecutive sentence ranging from 60 to 120 years. During sentencing, Christie's brother stood before the court and spoke directly to the man who had taken his sister away from their family. He said that if not for the incredible advances in modern science, combined with sheer determination and a little bit of luck, Raymond might have simply continued living his comfortable, celebrated life in Lancaster, never once held accountable for what he had done. He asked Raymond directly, in front of everyone in that courtroom, why he had done it. Raymond offered no real answer. Christie's father had also planned to speak at the sentencing, but he was overcome with grief in the moment and could not bring himself to address the court at all. Raymond only managed a brief, quiet apology to the family, telling them that he could not imagine what they had been through over the past 26 years. The lead prosecutor later described the case as one of the most chilling he had ever encountered in his entire career, not only because of the sheer horror of the crime itself, but because of how easily Raymond had been able to compartmentalize what he had done and continue living what looked, from the outside, like a completely normal, even admirable life. Christy Marak never got to see her students open their Christmas presents that year. She never got the chance to grow old, to start a family of her own, or to continue building the career she had dreamed about since she was a little girl pretending to teach her brother and sister. But because of the patience of dedicated investigators, the unwavering determination of a family who refused to let her case be forgotten, and the incredible advances in DNA technology over more than 2 decades, her killer did not get away with it forever. If you enjoy videos like this, please take a moment to give it a like. Subscribe to the channel for more true crime cases like this one, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from.